This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of July 3rd, 2023. And if you are listening to this on July 4th, well, happy Independence Day for you. And I hope that you're having a good time, maybe getting some hot dogs, hamburgers, enjoying a picnic, that sort of thing. All the all-American activities that we like to enjoy. But this week's podcast is a little bit different than the one last week. Last week's podcast raised a lot of hackles and a lot of confusion. Why are you talking about this kind of thing in this kind of podcast? I kept getting asked. Well, because people like to listen to it. That's the answer. And even though that was an off-topic podcast, it was also one of the best listened to, or most listened to, something like that, podcasts of the entire history of the Solid Signal podcast. You know, like top 2 or 3. So it tells me that, okay, sometimes it's all right to go a little far afield. But we're going back to basics this week with what I'm calling a twofer. 2 different topics on one single podcast. And I'm going to kind of keep it moving along, keep it going quickly so that I'm not wasting anybody's time. Hopefully you're interested in both of these topics. If not, well, I apologize for that, but enjoy anyway. First topic I want to talk about, if you're a DirecTV user, you probably woke up this morning realizing that some of your local channels are gone in some cities. That's not nationwide, but it is a lot of stations owned by a company called Nexstar. Nexstar's contract with DirecTV comes up just like clockwork about every 4 or 5 years. They always come to loggerheads, and last time I actually looked it up on the Solid Signal blog. The blackout lasted about a month and a half, and it was resolved before the beginning of the new TV season, as a lot of times these things are. But this time around, I'm a little concerned that they're not going to be rushing through it. Why does this happen? It happens for one reason and one reason only, because a big company wants more money than they're getting. And I'm not talking about DirecTV. I'm talking about companies like Nexstar. You might think that the biggest media companies in broadcast television are things like, NBC, Comcast, ABC, Disney, Paramount, CBS, and those are some pretty big names. But when you talk about who owns more stations, there are a few names that you've probably never heard of who own more stations than pretty much anybody else, and more than Paramount, more than Disney, more than anybody. One of those is a company called Nexstar. I have to go back and look and see how many they own, but it's hundreds and hundreds of TV stations across the country. Now, this used to be illegal. It used to only be legal to own 5 TV stations, and that was it. Now, that sounded like a pretty good deal to me, but big business triumphed, and they got the right to own more or less as many TV stations as they wanted, even in the same market. Is that anti-competitive? Is it monopolizing information? That is not for me to say. What is for me to say is that it is the truth. And so these large companies try to make big deals with companies like DirecTV and Dish and Xfinity, and sometimes those deals don't work out. Matter of fact, when it comes to Nexstar, it seems like they hardly ever work out. And this has got to be because Nexstar itself is asking too much money. Local channels are still incredibly important, and people love to have their local channels, especially when it's the fall TV season and there's a lot of new stuff that's on there. However, that doesn't mean that a company like Nexstar should demand a virtually unlimited amount of money for people to watch their local channels. And it always seems to come to this. It always seems to come to a problem. And it always seems to come to a blackout. So what can you do? Well, if you're on DirecTV and you want to do something about it now, you can switch providers. You could switch to Dish, and Signal Group is a Dish dealer. We'll be happy to do that for you. On the other hand, if you want to support DirecTV because you think that, okay, they're doing the right thing by standing up to these companies so they keep your bill as low as it is possible to be, and I realize that the bills are very high already to begin with, well, then stay with DirecTV and find another way to get that station. You can sign up for a free trial of one of the streaming services that will give you local channels. You can see if the local channel is available through a streaming app. For example, if you've lost your CBS, it might be available through the Paramount Plus app. Or, my favorite choice, you can get a TV antenna. Now, I think this is a great option because a TV antenna is one of those buy once, keep forever, use forever kind of things that is just going to benefit you in the long run. And I really think that everybody should have a TV antenna, if for no other reason than for emergencies. About 90% of people can get TV over the air in the United States, and very few people do. I think it's somewhere around 10% of people use over the air antennas. I think that's way too low. I think that people should absolutely be watching more over-the-air television. For one thing, you're supporting your local broadcasters by watching the commercials that they put in. That's one thing. Second of all, you're supporting local broadcasting directly, and that's a good thing. And more importantly, you get a reliable, stable signal that is not going to go out because somebody is having a little fight with somebody about how much to pay somebody else. If you're looking for an antenna, you should get one at solidsignal.com because we have the best selection of all the best brands, and we can offer you the support that you need to try to pick the correct one. Call us at 888-233-7563, and you will get an expert who is capable of telling you exactly what you will need. And this is a real expert, not an overseas call center. This is somebody in our Detroit area offices who is going to be able to answer you about that. The second part of this podcast concerns antenna amplifiers. Now, this goes out to the roughly 10% of people who do use an over-the-air antenna. And a lot of folks put in an antenna amplifier because they think, okay, well, more signal is better, so I'm going to put in an amplifier. I'm going to crank it up to 11. Folks, that's not the way that digital signals work. When you're listening to digital audio, when you're watching digital video, the signal that you get is either ones or zeros. And all the tuner needs to know is if it's a 1 or a 0. It doesn't matter if it's a really, really loud one or a really, really soft one. As long as the tuner can determine that it's a 1 and not a 0, you're going to get the same level of signal. So a lot of people put in amplifiers for the wrong reason. Those folks who do put in amplifiers sometimes don't do it right. There are two different kinds of amplifiers that are used in antennas. Preamplifiers are designed so that you get a stronger signal coming from the antenna going into the house. It's designed to deal with that one long run from the antenna into the house, into the TV. Distribution amplifiers are usually found within the house, and they're a way to distribute signals that have already gotten into the house from one point out to every point in the house. Now, to some degree, an amplifier is an amplifier and is an amplifier, and you can use one instead of the other. But when you look at what the specialization is, you will find that a preamplifier goes outside and a distribution amplifier goes inside. A preamplifier generally gives you one output. A distribution amplifier gives you more than one. Now, there's some, by the way. Take, for example, the Twofer amplifiers, which have a splitter built into the power injector so that you can run two TVs off of the same preamplifier. That's kind of halfway between a preamp and a distribution amp, if you think about it that way. It's kind of a neat way of doing it. But choosing the wrong kind of amplifier is another mistake that people get. People have a tendency, like I said, put in the most powerful thing they can put in and not know where to put it. Put in that preamplifier close to the antenna, put that distribution amplifier inside the house. And there's a third kind of amplifier, and that's really what I want to talk about in this particular podcast. There's smart amplifiers, and smart amplifiers are not what most people think they are. I've been told by our Solid Signal Warehouse team that a lot of folks are confused by the use of things like the Twofer SmartCom amplifier or the Johansson Smart amplifiers. You see, a smart amplifier doesn't necessarily combine multiple signals from multiple antennas the way you think it does. Rather than taking all the signal coming in from both antennas and adding it together, which is one way of doing it, and if you've installed everything right, it's going to work for you. What a smart amplifier is going to do is find the best signal out of the 2 or 3 antennas you've got hooked up there and really pump it up hard so that it is as good as it can possibly be. A lot of folks get a smart amplifier and they think that it's going to combine signals in a way that, for example, if you've got, say, negative 40 dB on one antenna and negative 20 dB on the other, that you're going to have like negative 0 or negative 2 dB or plus 5 dB. You're going to have a lot more signal. Well, these are made up numbers, by the way. Don't get up in my grill, as the children say. The point is, that's not how that works. The point is, you will get the strongest of the multiple antennas you hook up, not a combined signal. What you will get is, on every channel, you will get the best possible signal. These antenna amplifiers are really good at that stuff. You can do it automatically, or in the case of the televis amplifiers, you can actually use an app to determine what comes from where. But I would just say, beware using a smart amplifier if you don't know what a smart amplifier is used for. It's something that, you don't want to be disappointed. You don't want to have to process a return. You want to do the absolute right thing in the first place. If you got questions, if you don't know how amplifiers work, if you need a suggestion on an amplifier, I'll give you that number again. 888-233-7563 is the number. 888-233-7563. And these are the experts at Signal Group. These are the ones who answer the phone every day and who can help you find the antenna and the amplifier of your dreams. That's about it for the Solid Signal podcast, as I like to say. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Makes me look good to my bosses. Come back every week for a new dose of craziness here at the Solid Signal podcast. And as always, shop at solidsignal.com. It pays my salary, and I'm really, really grateful for that. Have a great week.